Well, joining me live is CNN reporter Oren Liebermann. He's just outside Tel Aviv at the Wolfson Medical Center, where a few of the hostages have been taken. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, big news. What do we know about the condition of the hostages?
Of course, the hospital here has been very careful when it comes to talking about the hostages who were brought here, a total of 5. The first 2 arrived almost shockingly quickly after the hostages entered Israel here by ambulance. The next 3 arrived several hours later by helicopter nearby and were then brought by ambulance to the hospital itself. There are 5 elderly women who were released in this first group of 13 women and children who were freed. The hospital wouldn't get into specifics about their conditions, only saying that it was incredibly important that as soon as they arrived here, their family was waiting for them. The hospital staff were ready to greet them, the nurses, the doctors, everybody ready to embrace them as they begin their recovery. They said there was not a dry eye here in the hospital as they came in. They've been receiving medical checks, and that includes their physical condition, but also their mental conditions after nearly 50 days of captivity at the hands of Hamas. They have been given a special area of the hospital that's been secluded so they can maintain their privacy, and that's for the freed hostages and their families. Crucially, the hospital itself knows this process is not over, and it may play out several times over the course of the next few days. So they are ready, they say, to receive more freed hostages here. This hospital will focus on the elderly hostages. There are other hospitals throughout the country who will focus on the foreign nationals who have been released, the children who have been released. So the whole system trying to prepare itself to take these hostages in, to essentially treat them and provide them the help they need as they're reunited with their family and as they end 7 weeks or longer very soon in captivity.
Oren, you made some really interesting points there, including not a dry eye in sight with the family reuniting with the hostages there. Have you had a chance to hear from any of the family members, hear what they've had to say at all?
Not at this hospital. We expect that some may come out with statements tomorrow. We have been in touch with the Families and Hostages Forum, and a doctor who spoke with some of the hostages who were freed by telephone said they're appear to be, at least from what he can tell from the phone call, in okay shape, in okay condition. He said from what he could diagnose here over the phone, some of them seem to have stomach issues, but it was important to get them here for a full and thorough check. Tonight, we only really heard from that doctor as well as the chief nurse of Israel and the director general of the hospital itself. Hopefully, when the time is right, when the hostages, the freed hostages now are ready, they will come out and tell us, first of all, how they're doing, but then about the ordeal they underwent in the hands of Hamas captivity.
Oren, how was the release facilitated? Talk us through that.
So this was an incredibly delicate process that had a number of moving parts. The first prerequisite for that part, of course, was the truce, the pause in fighting going into effect, and then the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. We were in central Tel Aviv when all of that began to play out, and it did so over a period of several hours. 9 hours after the fighting stopped, we began to get word that the hostages, this first 13 group of women and children, had been given or transferred to the Red Cross. The Red Cross then brought them to the Rafah border crossing. They entered Egypt and were then taken by bus into Israel to the Hatzerim air base, a major air base in southern Israel, not all that far from the Gaza border, probably about an hour away from the Gaza border by car. And then 2 hostages were brought very quickly here by ambulance, the others taken by helicopter to this hospital and to other hospitals in the country, depending on children, elderly, foreign nationals. It is a process now we hope we see play out 3 more times over the course of the next 3 days. Israel has received the list of the hostages who are to be released tomorrow. Once again, it is women and children. So we'll see this process hopefully play out as relatively smoothly as it did today. It is also, of course, worth noting that after Israel confirmed that the Israeli hostages had entered the country again, there was the release of 39 Palestinian women and children who were held in Israeli jails. We just saw the piece a moment ago when they were freed and returned to their families and, frankly, their communities who welcomed them with more than open arms. So that, too, is part of this process that we'll be watching very closely to see if it plays out. The Qataris have worked very hard to try to troubleshoot all of the different scenarios to make sure this process doesn't fall apart.
Oren Liebermann, we do have to wrap it up there, but really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us.